All right, everybody. Oh, hello there. I'm Richard. You're watching the Cabinet Wise Workshop. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm going to show you how I install flush inset cabinet doors. But first, I'm going to make the doors. So I'm going to show you how I make them and how I install them. This is just going to be 2 doors for a bathroom linen built-in cabinet. So here's the linen cabinet that I've already assembled. It's built in 2 pieces so that it will fit in the room. That's often a challenge you face as a cabinet maker, being able to determine if a cabinet will be able to get down a narrow hallway or through a narrow door. But since this is a full height cabinet and the hallway is pretty tight, so we had to make this in 2 pieces and it will join together on site. It does have a vent cut into the face frame because there is a floor vent behind, and the client decided they did not want to put any sort of vent on top of it, so we just integrated that into the face frame. Here's my pencil drawn plan, 100 inches tall, each opening 44 inches. The door, which I've drawn, is going to be 43 7/8. For inset, I make the doors 1/8 shy of the opening in the height and the width. So the height is 44, width is 15. So the door is 43 7/8 by 14 7/8. So I leave that 1/8 inch play, and then I scribe fit the doors to a perfect fitment once the doors are made. So the door we're going to make today, out of a variety of doors, starts with the humble shaker door, which is very popular. Now, however, some people want more detail. There are routed detail options. So if you go this direction, these are roundovers that are routed into the door. And here's a roundover with a step. So you see, this is routed into the door itself. Then if you go the other direction, you have what's called the applied molding door. These are all essentially a shaker door with a molding that is mitered and applied in the inside. So this is the one we're going to be making today. And I will make a shaker door and miter this into the frame of the door. And then we will fit this into the cabinet. So let's get to work. So here we are at the radial arm saw. I get a lot of use out of it. We do all of our cross cutting on the radial arm saw. I'm going to select from my selection here of alder hardwood. These doors are going to be painted, and oftentimes people have asked me, what do I use for paint grade as far as face frames and door frames? Oftentimes I use alder. Sometimes I'll use maple or poplar, but I find my favorite wood that I go to the most often is alder. So here's my selection of alder. It's a little lean at the moment. We go through quite a bit of it, so I have another shipment coming in soon. It's delivered by my hardwood supplier, Moore Newton Hardwood, out of San Leandro, California. They have a great selection. This is not an ad, by the way, but I'm open to the possibility, Moore Newton, if you're watching. S2S 2-side surface. So I don't ever order lumber just in the rough because it involves so much more planing and milling, and we're just not equipped for that. We try to streamline the process by having minimal milling we need to do here at the shop to speed everything up. I'm just going to cross cut it a little bigger than I need, then I can rip it down on the table saw, and then I can come back and get my final lengths once again on the radial arm saw. I'm going to rip them a little wider than 2 inches because I'm going to then run them through the joiner to their final size. Now that I've ripped my stiles down to 2 inches, I do want to note that my rails I kept wider. This is wider so that I can still cut my 2 and 2. So this is 2 rails, this is 2 rails. This just makes running through the end grain easier when I'm cutting the tongue for the tongue and groove of my shaker doors. All right, I was just back in the storage room getting my 1/4 inch plywood out. This is maple 1/4 inch plywood with an MDF core. And now we have our 1/4 inch center panels. Before we run these pieces through the router table, we're going to first surface them. One little pro tip when running wood through the joiner: wood is directional. So many woodworkers out there, you already know this. See, if you look closely at the grain, you'll notice when I'm running through the joiner, I'm paying attention to which way I'm running it through. The fingers of the wood are pointing, if you'll notice, they're pointing that way. So that means when you run it through, you want to run this way through it. You would not want to run against this, because then you're going to cause all this to tear out. You're going to have a lot of tear out. So there you go. The more you know. Here we are at our humble router table station. Yes, these are simple homemade router tables. Just to show you, you do not need the fanciest equipment. You can produce quite a great result with this, and I'm going to show you that right now. In the last video, I showed we made those doors with these bits here, but I did not actually show the process. So I'm going to go into that now. The groove, and this is where we cut the tongue. Now I know what you're thinking. I should have used a push stick for those, but it's a little tricky in this situation to get it on there without making it flip up. So believe it or not, it just feels a little safer for me to do it that way. But do not try it at home. I've been doing this for 22 years. So always be very careful around the table saw. I literally focus with all my attention on what I'm doing. I never zone out on the table saw. It's very important. Where was I? Here we have our door pieces, nice and clean. Trying to show everything as closely as I can to show how clean it really is. Look at that, it turned out nice. It's always important to be proud of your work. No matter how long you've been doing it, it's important to do a good job and to care and to want to produce your best work each time, because you're only as good as the last thing you produced. So next, I'm going to do these decorative cutouts again. It sort of looks like a flower. And here we are, the cabinet, the doors. So I'm going to assemble these, and then we're going to mill up the applied molding. Let's assemble these doors. By now you all know the drill. Nice generous helping of tight bond wood glue. This is the bead bit in here. Here's a close-up. They come in different sizes. Here's a larger bead router bit. This is the one we're using, and it's a 1/4 inch bead, which will yield a total of 3/8 if you also count the flatland. So the flatland is 1/8, and then the bead itself is 1/4. Now, are you really woodworking if you're not totally covered in sawdust? Speaking of sawdust, just a little bit of, don't mind that. All right, little bead, let's go. And at this stage, I will rip each side to 3/8 because we want the 1/4 bead and the 1/8 flatland. That's very important. But I'm actually going to rip it a little bit oversized so I can mill it down to exactly 3/8 in the planer. And there's our bead molding. And next we're going to cut it this way, because this width is too much for the depth of the center panel recess. So let's go check this. So there we have 5/16 recess. So we want this to be 5/16. All right, I've gone ahead and ripped this down to size. There you go. What do you think of that? Not bad. And that is an applied molding door. So next I will go ahead and sand these doors, and then we're gonna miter each piece so that it all fits snugly in place. All right, so I always miter one side first, just so half the work's done. I'll take the piece of molding over to the corner and then mark right there. Just like that. Now I'll cut the rest of them. For this, I'm using a 23 gauge headless pin nailer with 1-inch nails. And I put just a little bead of glue on the inside edge. And there's one door down. All right, we're making progress, and that's what this is all about. Now I'm going to drill the holes in the doors for the hinges. I use Blum half crank Inserta hinges. I'm going to bore the main hole and the 2 pilot holes using my boring machine. That in combination with the 9mm Blum hinge plate. I flush out the walls on the inside of the cabinet when I'm doing flush inset, and this mounts on the inside wall. This works when you flush out the inside wall with your face frame, and that depends on if you're doing face frame or frameless. There are a whole variety of thicker base plates, for instance 19mm thicker plates if you do have a reveal. So the combination I'm using here in this video is a flushed out wall 9mm plate with a half crank hinge, and that gets us the gap that we need. But there are many other options, 1/8 to 7/8, depending on the plate you choose. These all work with the full crank hinge. And the one I'm showing is with a 9mm plate with the half crank. This sits back just shy of 1.5 inches from the face, and the center point 3.5 down. This in combination with a 1/4 inch tab, the space between the edge of the door and the bore hole. And these just pop right in. Inserta, you go into the hole, and then they expand when you press down. And before I do the final door fitting, I'm just wrapping up the inside of the cabinet for pullouts. For flush inset door hinges, I put 1.5 inch spacer blocks. We'll bring the slide out the distance it needs to clear the door. Now it's time to put the doors back on the cabinet. I use my scribe tool, which is a piece of 1/8 inch thick walnut hardwood, then trim it on my belt sander, ease all the edges, and put them back on. And this yields the perfect fitment.